Welcome back, guys. I Do you guys hear the construction noise? I can't help it though. Let's begin. Welcome back, guys. In today's video, I'll be discussing with you the books that I read in the month of June. I read a total of 3 books, and without any further ado, and before this noise gets even worse, let's begin. So, the first book that I read was The Good Girl Complex by Elle Kennedy. It's supposed to be a romance. Like, what's supposed to be? It is a romance, but a little backstory before we get into what the book is about. So I went to this bookstore thinking today I'll browse this bookstore, pick out a book that no one has heard of, something that I find relatable, some blurb that I find really good, and read that book and feel good about myself. However, after reading this book, I realized why people go for highly recommended best-selling books in stores and not some random pick. Okay, so about the book, we follow our main character, Mackenzie. Mackenzie is the quintessential good girl. She is responsible, she's smart, and she wants to live up to the expectation of her parents, of her friends, and even boyfriend. And even though she's made a career for herself after school by creating this internet business, she is being forced by her parents to still attend college. However, that is not what really she wants to do because she's already earning. Okay, but she still goes to this college in this seaside town called Avalon Bay. And in Avalon Bay, she finds this guy called Cooper. Cooper is your quintessential bad boy with tattoos, and he is not a little, he's very wary of these rich kids who come to the college and think of the town as their own. However, Mackenzie and Cooper form a friendship which later blossoms to a relationship, and it's a book about that. But what I've just said is really sugarcoating stuff. What all happened in the book is so cliched, so basic that I did not like it at all. I read the book for the sake of having read a rom com, but it wasn't a rom com, it was just a romance which wanted to deal with some really good themes which it could not do justice to. For example, it did not do justice to the title itself. If it's called the good girl complex, please show me how this good girl transformed into a person who live up to her own choices. It did not do justice to the title itself. How could I like the book? It was a very mediocre read. I am saying it's a mediocre read because just because I picked that book up on my own volition, no one told me, no one recommended me. I thought it's called the Good Girl Complex. Maybe it will be relatable to me as well. It wasn't, and yeah, it was a very very not boring. It was a very unfresh, dull take on romances. Could have done something fresh out of the usual tropes that we usually see in romances, like bad boy, good girl. That's very common, but could have made it a little more interesting somehow. But it could not do that, so it was a very mediocre read for me. The second book that I read was a classic mystery-ish book. It's called The Chill by Ross McDonald. So, in this book, a private investigator, Lou Archer, is being hired by Alex to search for his wife who has gone missing just a few hours after their wedding. And although the investigator is able to locate her pretty soon, but the subsequent events that follow make this case, which was a simple searching for a missing person case, into a case involving 3 murders spanning decades. It's a very psychologically driven, suspense driven novel which delves into human psyche, human minds, past traumas, family dynamics. So, if that is something that interests you, maybe this is a book for you. Now, regarding my experience reading this book, I had a good enough time to recommend this book to people, but not highly recommended. I was enmeshed in the thick of the plot. I wanted to know how the plot would unfold. However, the conclusion left me a little dissatisfied. It was sort of open ended, not open ended. It wasn't well rounded enough for me to have the closure. Okay, this was the person, this was the culprit. But I guess then again, that's the stylistic choice of the author, so can't complain much about that. But that aside, it was a pretty good read for me. This was a book that I picked up from a book fair and paid a relatively lower price than the previous book that I read, and it was better than the previous book. Now, for the last book that I read this month, it's called The Stationery Shop of Tehran, and it became my new favorite. So in this book we follow 17-year-old Roya, who is living and growing up in this politically charged environment of Tehran in the 1950s. And her way of getting away and escaping this political upheaval is by going to Mr. Fakhri's stationery shop, wherein she loses herself in the poetry books, in books that are being translated from foreign languages. Here, one day, she meets another person, Bahman, who is this charming, like justice driven boy, young man, not boy. And she and he click. That is such a Gen Z way to describe it. Okay, by the way, okay, let me be a little more articulate. Their relationship blossoms into something so beautiful. However, life had different plans. Regarding how I felt reading this book became one of those few books that made me feel alive with emotions after having read a book. And it hasn't happened for a long time, to be honest. So this was very fresh, very exhilarating and exciting for me. First thing first, after having read so many Western authors and books that were set in United States or London or wherever, this book felt so culturally resonant because it's an Asian country and there are so many similarities with Indian culture that I just felt at home reading this book. The book is, it's immersive, it's emotional, it's heartbreaking, it's healing, it's multi-layered, and it's not as if it has some themes or plot lines that I haven't read about, but it's done so beautifully by the author in this book that I was just left in awe of the author and her writing style. All in all, it's my new favorite, guys, so please read this book. Plus, an amazing thing about this book is that anyone who's wanting to get into reading can read this book. It's very easy to read and it has themes that caters to, I guess, all sort of audiences. So I think this is a book that everyone should read, and I might as well read her other works as well. So yeah, at the end of the month, it was a really good book that ended my reading month, so I'm very happy about that. Let's see what next month has in store for me. I am currently shooting this in July and I have completed one book. It was a good book, but that is for another video. I hope that you liked the video and stay tuned for another videos, please.